Revelation chapter 17, be reading the entire chapter. Hear the word of the Lord. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast, and with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen, one is, and the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes of nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth." May the Lord add his blessings to the reading of his holy word. Well, in 1922, Collier's magazine coined the term consumerism for the protection of consumers' interests, like customer rights, and soon it began to be ambiguously applied to a life in a capitalist economy, including high levels of consumption for the indulgent and kind of frivolous collecting of things, knickknacks, baubles, like porcelain figurines and glassware and decorative vases and candles and dolls and doll houses and beanie babies and squishmallows and snow globes and that kind of stuff. That was originally consumerism. Then in 1955, John Bugas, who was second in command at the Ford Motor Company, reinterpreted the new term to more positively characterize capitalism and this kind of ongoing ideological debate, the Cold War. Quote, "The term consumerism would pin the tag where it actually belongs, on Mr. Consumer, the real boss and beneficiary of the American system. It would pull the rug right out from under our unfriendly critics," referring to the Marxists, "who have blasted away so long and loud at capitalism. Somehow, I just can't picture them shouting, 'Down with the consumers!'" Well, consumerism then depends on consumer sovereignty. That is how, as the business saying goes, the customer is king, and the consumer is committed first and foremost to himself. There's nothing outside the consumer that should restrain him. No loyalty like to a country, no patriotism, not even a wedding vow, a family relation, or a church covenant. As someone said, the consumer has become a godlike figure before whom markets and politicians alike bow. In consumerism, people are free to choose the house or the car or the internet service provider, the restaurant, the cereal, the church, whatever they feel meets their needs. Now, so far you might think, well, yeah, what's the problem? Freedom leads to a vibrant economy, which leads to efficient wealth creation, and thus the alleviation of poverty. All true. But our problem is that the values of consumerism, unrestrained, do not confine themselves to the market, to things, to cars and televisions, phones. Soon we are selling or buying not just things, but if possible, persons. If it doesn't make me happy right now, I'll buy a new one, a new friend. So I'll pay a counselor to listen to me, pretend like he's a friend. A new spouse, so serial divorce. A new family, so surrogacy or IVF, to buy a custom-made child, screened, of course, for any undesirable characteristics that might crimp my style. A new God and church, one that will treat me, the customer of the new religion, like a king. So in unrestrained consumerism, it's capitalism as a lifestyle, not just an economic principle. Everything can be bought or sold. Capitalism may be a great way to make a living. It's a horrible way to make a life. We see that here in symbolism and things that we can see in three pictures. First, the prostitute. Second, the beast. Finally, the consumption. Well, one of the seven angels who poured out the seven bowls comes to John and said, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters." Now, first we see what the ESV translates as the great prostitute. I would prefer that it be translated as the great whore. That's how the KJV, the King James Version, translates it. And that's now considered a crude term. This is an example of a word that used to be common, now becoming almost considered profanity. But I think sometimes it's appropriate to use crude terms for crude things. The Greek word is pornes, where we get porneia, for sexual immorality. So it's the word we get porn from. She is the great pornes, actually Greek, the mega pornes. The prostitute is a symbol of consuming and selling everything, even what should not be sold. Now we have a word for that, consumerism. And in consumerism, everything can be sold. The great prostitute is described for us in the next chapter, in Revelation chapter 18, verses 11 to 13. There she is decried for consuming everything. Now, understandably, when we first start reading the list, okay, this is kind of normal. You can buy and sell gold and jewels and pearls and fine linen and cinnamon and spice and wine and oil. But it doesn't stop there. The great prostitute dealt in, literally it says, the bodies, the somatone in Greek, and the souls of men. Somatone means bodies, but it was a Greek term for slaves. Consumerism had reduced some people to slaves who were just simply called the somata, the bodies. Slaves were the bodies that you could buy to meet your needs. You need help in your field, or you need help around your house? Well, you go buy a body. Slavery was the commodification of human beings, and thus it was a fruit of consumerism, the great prostitute. Even if the word is new, the reality is not. And for the great prostitute, even souls, the lives, the persons, like what should be covenant relationships, they're consumed. Then once the person has been consumed, he or she is no longer useful. You do with them what you do with anything else that's become obsolete, like a one-use food container. You dispose of them. The love of consumerism doesn't stop at material. Many a divorcee will testify that love lasts longer than the love pledged at the wedding altar. It will consume everything. And then eventually, it will be consumed. In verse 1, the angel tells John that he will show him the judgment, or literally the punishment, of the great prostitute. Now, first we see who she is. Before we see how she's punished, we see who she is. She is seated on many waters. It's on Babylon. The literal Babylon in the Old Testament was the empire that destroyed Jerusalem and the temple and took Israel away as captives. And Jeremiah told Israel's captives, trapped in Babylon, told them to seek the welfare of the city of Babylon. Daniel served first in Babylon. Now, Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13, uses the word Babylon as a code word for Rome. At his time, in John's time, Rome was the power. Before it had been Babylon, but now Rome was the power that had been oppressing God's people. So here in Revelation, we have three images of similar but not the same meaning. We have the great prostitute, which is the consumeristic culture of the world system. We have Babylon, which is the great power, and we have the beast, which is the totalitarian state. We've already talked about him some. The regime of Babylon, the beast. So Babylon is the great power of the world system, Rome then at that time, but it can be any great power now. The great prostitute is Babylon's consumerism, and the beast is Babylon's regime, its establishment. Now, the great prostitute is seated on many waters. Now, the waters or the seas in the book of Revelation represent the world with its different nations, and so it's unstable, like waves. It can be tumultuous, stormy, and dangerous sometimes. And we're told exactly what that means. The great prostitute seated on many waters. In verse 15, near the end of the chapter, the waters that you saw are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. It's multi-ethnic, in other words, all kinds of different people. And as such, it's unsteady. It can fall apart because they're not connected. It's precarious, like a Jenga tower that could collapse at any moment. In Daniel chapter 4, it's compared to a statue that's part iron and part clay, and those aren't going to hold together. Now, we in America, since we've been told over and over again, over the last generation, that diversity is our strength, we might not see the problem here. Diversity by itself is not a strength. You might think that's a strange thing to say for a man who's in a diverse marriage, but it's true. Diverse people do not naturally hold together. The only way that diversity can be a strength is if the diverse people share a unifying value, something that they love, more than their diverse identities. Now, for America, that's been freedom. I might not agree with some of your choices, like what religion to believe in or who to vote for, but I support your freedom, your right to make those sometimes bad choices. In Singapore, I was once visited by a Jehovah's Witness guy, and I did not report him to the police there, even though it's illegal in Singapore, because I'm an American and I don't believe in suppressing people's religious choices, because that's the beast. I did report flyers advertising pornography, because that's the great prostitute, and I'd like to see her suppressed. In the church, the multi-ethnic diversity is only our strength if our love for Jesus is stronger than whatever racial or cultural differences we have. The great prostitute in verse 2 has committed sexual immorality with the kings of the earth. That is all kinds of countries, all kinds of ethnicities all over the world. And with the wine of whose sexual immorality, the dwellers on earth have become drunk. Now, in that one sentence, starting in verse 1 and into verse 2, 3 times in that one sentence, different forms of the word for sexual immorality, porneia, occur. The immoral one has committed immorality and addicted people to immorality. The point is not only about sexual immorality, but about the whole life of consuming everything, even that which should not be consumed, which should not be bought or sold. Sexual immorality is using someone else for your pleasure without a covenant with them, without any commitment to them, just treating them as an object. Consumerism is doing that with everything, with your whole life, as a lifestyle. Now here, the dwellers on earth, not God's people who live on earth, have become drunk with it. They've fallen in love with consumerism, with a life of self-indulgence. And so never mind others, never mind what it does for others. I'll spend exorbitantly on myself. Never mind that I could share that with others and do something for them, maybe people in need. This is all about me, my consumption, my thrill, whatever comes next. They're intoxicated not only by sexual immorality, although there may be a lot of that, a lot of porn. Usually these things all go together, but by expensive vacations, flying first class, 4-star hotels with mints on their pillows, luxury cars that cost more than a down payment for a house, silk suits, designer labels, conspicuous consumption, all about me. Nothing about you don't care about anyone else, because it's all about consuming for my own pleasure. Like an alcoholic who craves his next drink, they crave their next extravagance, their next indulgence. And vast numbers of people, dwellers on earth they're called, are like that. Even if they're not rich, even if they're poor, still they're addicted to the very thought. The only difference between the rich and the poor often is the poor want to do these things, they just can't. They're still just as selfish and just as indulgent often. They're addicted to the thought of getting the next thing. That's why they love the lottery and gambling. Lotteries do best in poor neighborhoods. They're appealing to the greed of the poor. and gambling. They hope they can get rich quick and indulge all their cravings. And so John is carried away in the Spirit in his vision, in verse 3, to see the punishment of the great prostitute. He's in the wilderness, he's in some deserted place, and he's going to see it there. And now he sees the great prostitute sitting on a scarlet beast. The beast is the regime, which is scarlet here to represent its immorality. It was full of blasphemous names, like before. Remember Domitian's title? Lord and God, taking names that only belong to God, to himself, or maybe like Vicar of Christ. Great self-promoting titles. The beast has 7 heads, which is complete authority, and 10 horns, full power. This is the second time Revelation tells us this. Actually, there'll be another in this chapter, so it's repeating this for emphasis, emphasizing the power of the regime. And it is so far carrying the great prostitute. Now, more on the beast later, but now we're looking at the great prostitute. She was arrayed in purple and scarlet, which is expensive colors in those days. The dye to make scarlet and purple was very expensive, hard to get. So mostly only was worn by wealthy people. Purple was associated with royalty because mostly only kings and queens could afford to get it. And so she is rich. She's adorned. She's all decked out in verse 4. She's beautifully presented with gold and jewels and pearls. She's pretty. She's alluring. Sin is attractive. It looks good. The idea that you could be sexually immoral or maybe have the thug life, or you just live a life just full of self-indulgence, whatever, catering to all your every whim and not have to think about anything else, not caring about what anyone else says, not even the authorities, being able to indulge yourself, take what you want and get away with it. That appears so charming. It's so attractive. It's like a tasty drink. You want some. The great prostitute holds in her hands a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. It looks so good, and so we fall for it. And then we find out it's a trap. The great prostitute has a name written on her forehead. One commentator said that Roman prostitutes had a custom of wearing headbands with the names of their owners, their pimps, on it. And here in verse 5, the name is a mystery. In other words, it's a clue to a revelation. And the name is Babylon the Great. That's who she belongs to. Mother of prostitutes and earth's abominations. Abominations are detestable things, disgusting things. And they come from her. Babylon is the great power, remember? The hegemon. That imposes its will on others and produces prostitutes. It's people who sell, not only sex, they do that too, but anything that should not be sold. They may sell out their conscience to do whatever gets them ahead in Babylon. Right? We've had times in history where people, if the regime says, we will believe in this religion, they'll be obediently and they'll go along with it. They'll bow to it. And then it changes their mind. The king dies and another one comes along. No, we're going to believe in this religion. They'll sell out, go right to it. They're easily bought. The great prostitute is also, in verse 6, drunk with the blood of the saints. She's indulged in the beast's killing of faithful witnesses to Jesus. She's thrived on consuming the church. Is the USA today's Babylon? Well, when I finished the coursework for my PhD, year 2000, we went back to Singapore in the interval. I would go running around a local reservoir there, seeing Singapore Armed Forces, big Chinook helicopters. You know, those had 2 blades, one in the front, one in the back. They're big things. Made in the USA! And I consider whether USA was today's Babylon, the corrupting superpower, the seat of the great prostitute, especially at that time, the administration of great corruption. And during the interval, I wrote an article on how the American evangelicalism is spiraling downwards as the culture becomes more corrupt. And then on one evening in September, I came home to the very odd sight of American television being broadcast live in Singapore, showing planes hitting the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and one disappearing over Pennsylvania. Interesting choice of targets, wasn't it? One center for business, like the great prostitute. One the center of power, like the beast. And then the other one was supposed to hit the beast, but turned into a symbol of great heroism. The next morning, because it all happened at night there. I wondered whether I got up, was that all a bad dream? Across the street, went to buy a newspaper, had a large banner headline over a picture of the World Trade Center blowing up, America on its knees. And I thought, in the words of the title of a book I had read about China during the Japanese invasion, my country and my people. Maybe America is a Babylon today. But like Jeremiah to Israel's captives in the literal Babylon, we seek the welfare of the city. Like Daniel, we can live and work to make Babylon less whore-like, less beastly. Second, the beast. Starting in verse 7. When John saw the great prostitute, he marveled greatly. Literally, it says, I wondered with great wonder. But the angel said to him, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carries her. And then he proceeds to describe the beast, the regime that carries, for a while, the prostitute. In verse 8, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. I think, what does that mean? Was and is not, is about to rise. It sounds like it's kind of like it's imitating Christ. Remember when the second beast was introduced in the second half of chapter 13? It looked like a lamb. Sounded like a dragon when it spoke, but it looked like a lamb. Here the beast, it was, and it is, like presently, is not like Christ who died, and it will rise like Christ rose. But Jesus rose from the dead. This beast will rise from the bottomless pit. And remember, Satan fell from heaven, probably was pushed, and then came to earth, opened the bottomless pit, where all kinds of monsters, waves of these bizarre, they're like locusts in that they get into everything. They torment people. They're like ideas that come from the pit. They seep into all of life. They make people miserable with their ideas like Marxism, racism, feminism, transgenderism. The beast will come from there too, inspired by Satan. Satan inspires governments to be total, to take the place of God. So you depend on the government for everything. And to tell us how to live in every way, to control everything. Those who are not God's people will be consumed by it. He says, the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written from the book of life from the foundation of the world, they will be consumed by that regime. So the fact that God did not write their names down in that book of life is the cause of them being consumed by the beast. Understand? Others, whose names are written, then, by implication, it's implied, they will not be consumed. They will be held fast. Before creation, from the foundation of the world, before anyone had done anything good or bad, before, he means both before chronologically and causally, that is, in what caused what. God did not look forward in history. Like before he created everything, he kind of looks forward. I'm about to create the world, and these people will come into being, and I can see that this one will do good, this one will believe, so I'm going to write their names down because of what they do, and I can see it before they do it. No, if that were the case, then we cause God to choose us, to write our names down. No, he means before we had done anything good or bad, before our choices caused anything, God wrote the names of his people. And they are not consumed by the beast or the great prostitute. And they're not consumed because God wrote our names down in his book. They don't make the government their God. They don't live for consuming. God protects them. He wrote their names down. He protects them. He holds them fast. But the others whom God did not write down their names, those he doesn't protect, and they are consumed. They are consumed by awe at the beast who is acting like Christ, except for he didn't rise from the dead. He rises from the pit. Who is the beast? In verse 9, this calls for a mind with wisdom. In other words, figure it out. You got to think about this. The beast has 7 heads, and then he tells us what this means. It's like the city on 7 mountains or hills. Okay, at least in John's time, this is a pretty obvious clue. It was Rome. We even call it today the city set on 7 hills. but it can be of any regime now. It's not just confined to the meaning of this for John's time. It is meaningful for us. Any regime now that acts like Rome did then is and can be a beast. And verse 10, they, the heads, are also 7 kings, or it could be translated kingdoms. 7 kingdoms, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come. Now, some try to count the Roman emperors, which is, if you started Augustus, would mean that Revelation was written during the 6th emperor, Galba, right? 1 is, 5 have fallen, 1 is Galba. But he only reigned for less than 1 year, only ruled for a few months in 68. And of course, there were many more after him, a lot more than 7. Or if it's kingdoms, and fallen sounds like it's referring to kingdoms, doesn't it? It says 5 have fallen. You don't usually talk about like past presidents. They don't say they fallen. If they died, you just say they died. So it's kind of the word you use for kingdoms, not rulers. And then you start with Israel, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece. 5 have fallen. And then 1 is Rome. And then finally, the new Babylon the Great. Or maybe since numbers are used symbolically in Revelation, consistently, always symbolically, it means that there will be a complete number, 7, complete. There'll be as many kingdoms as there are predestined to be, the perfect number until they're exhausted. And at 6, the number of man, the number of incompleteness, before we're complete, now is, in other words, that's where we live now. This is the interlude that we're in. We're at the 6. When the final Babylon the Great comes, it must remain only a little while. And the beast then in verse 11, that was, it is not, it is an 8th. Oh, so there are more than 7. So the numbers are literal after all. I thought there was only 7, but now there's 8. What's this? Well, it's symbolic. It belongs to the 7. In other words, it's like the 7, the beast, and it goes to destruction. The beast looks like it's going to be powerful. Looks like it is powerful, powerful appearing in its heyday, but it will collapse. It's going to destruction. The 10 horns in verse 12 are 10 kings, or it could be kingdoms. When the European Economic Community, which is the predecessor to the European Union, when it reached 10 members in 1981, and I remember this, Greece joined. Some saw that as the fulfillment of this passage. It's the beast with 10 horns, the European Economic Community. And then a few years later, Spain and Portugal joined, made it 12. Okay, what's this? I remember for a while they were discussing, well, maybe 2 will get knocked out. And now it's up to 27. So maybe those who think that this predicts a literal number of kings or nations need to rethink how they're interpreting Revelation. Maybe. The kings and the beasts will have power for a very short time in verse 12. It says for only an hour. This very short time. These are of one mind, he says. In other words, they're united. They're consumed by a common ideology. They're going to live for power. And they follow in lockstep a common regime, the beast. And so they hand over their power and their authority to the beast and serve that great power, Babylon. Together in verse 14, they will make war on the Lamb. They will seek to destroy Christ. Now, the only way they can do that is by making war on the body of Christ, the church. And as they do to the body of Christ, so they do to Christ himself. Like when Paul was going to persecute Christians, and Jesus met him and said, why do you persecute me? The beast wants to destroy Christ by destroying Christians. Just in the past decade, tens of thousands of Christians have been killed in northern Nigeria by Muslim terrorists. They're making war on the Lamb. But we're told here, kind of in a flash forward, what's coming at the end, the Lamb will conquer them. The beast and all those other horns, those kings. Jesus promised the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. The Lamb conquers because in the second half of verse 14, of who the Lamb is. Oh, they're kings, they think. We'll make war on the Lamb. Oh, but he is Lord of lords. He is King of kings. Or there may be a full number of kings and lords coming out with the beast to just try to destroy Christ, but he is their Lord and their King, whether they know it or not. And the Lamb's people, whom they're attacking to get to him, like the vulnerable Christians of northern Nigeria, they are called to and by the Lamb, and they're chosen by the Lamb, and they're faithful to the Lamb. So the beast, the regime, the Orwellian big brother, the all-consuming state, whatever it is, whatever form it takes, eventually loses. Finally, the consumption, starting in verse 15. Remember the angel promised to John back in verse 1? It's supposed to be about the judgment of the great prostitute. So now we're going to get to that. So far, she looks successful, though. Where's the judgment? She looks alluring. She's alluring everyone. Everyone whose name God is not written down in the book of life before the universe was created. Her consumerism is consuming everyone. She is riding the beast. So where is her judgment going to come from? It comes from the beast. Remember, the great prostitute is consumerism. The beast is the regime. And Babylon is where the beast rules and where the great prostitute, at least for a while, thrives. Babylon is diverse, but it's united by a shared love of consumerism and power. And then the 10 horns, a full number of powers, these kings and the beasts, they will turn on the great prostitute. Riding the beast is like riding a tiger. Might be great transportation for a while, but the problem is the dismount. Finally, power will destroy wealth. Regimes committed to preserving themselves will turn on those who are only committed to their own self-enrichment, only to money-making. Nationalism will turn on multinational corporations, MNCs. The great prostitute, cloaked in luxury and seduction, sensuous, embodies the allure of money, of indulgence, of decadence, and worldly success. Enticing regimes to buy what she sells, live for consumerism, promote just freedom to buy and sell anything that you can. And then the beast, the tiger in which the great prostitute is riding, the self-interested regime, it turns on consumerism. Thus, nationalistic regimes driven by self-interest and power will betray the multinational corporations, the MNCs, driven by self-interest and greed. MNCs care nothing for any nation, only in making money. If it gets hard in one nation, they'll go to another. They have no patriotism, no love for anything other than what enriches them. Beasts care only for power in themselves. So power will destroy wealth. One of the keys to America's prosperity, besides the Protestant work ethic, is our federal system that doesn't, or shouldn't, allow any government, state, local, or federal, to become a beast that destroys wealth, at least not too big a beast. If New York City votes for a communist for mayor, then many people just move to other states. They'll get away from it. And so the beast is held in check like that. The only thing that can hold consumerism in check is the gospel. The lamb conquering materialistic hearts that only care for baubles and indulgence. Transform them so that now they care for him and his people. Well, here are the beast and the multiple kings, the big regime, all the self-interested little regimes. They hate the globalist, multinational prostitute who teaches everyone to live for what they can devour, for consumption, to care nothing about anything, no loyalty, no love for anything, only for the appetites. Not that the beast and his minions, they hate greed and materialism. They don't. In fact, they carry it for a while. But they just love their power more. And they realize that this prostitute, this consumerism, that they've been indulging in, that they've been carrying, that now it undermines them. It makes for people who won't serve the beast, who only serve themselves, the kind of people who choose their country by the tax rate. There are people like that. Contrary to John Bugas, the beast will finally say, down with the consumers. So in verse 16, they will make her desolate, laid waste. She had been adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, but now she's got nothing. The beast confiscated it all, nationalized it for the people, they said, which really turned out for the oligarchs who are ruling the party in control. They will make her naked. She was clothed in scarlet and purple, remember? Wealthy clothes. Now, she's not clothed at all. Everyone can see who she is now. She's just self-indulgence, just plain out greed. And now she is consumed. And they will consume her with fire. Power destroys wealth. The regime destroys consumerism. This is all the judgment that the angel promised John was coming on the great prostitute. But why? Why did the beast turn on the prostitute? Why not subjugate her, use her? Why just turn to absolutely destroy her? After all, both the beast and the prostitute were opposed to the Lamb. That's one thing they had in common. The beast opposed the Lamb with power. The prostitute opposed him with allurements, with greed, materialism, sensuality, to draw people away from following Jesus. Why did the beast finally betray the prostitute? Because in verse 17, God put it into their hearts, the hearts of the beast and the multiple kings. God put it into their hearts to carry out, in other words, for the purpose of carrying out God's purpose. Notice that even the beast, making war on the Lamb, even the beast is under God's control. God steers the beast's heart. God put it into the heart of the regime and the little regimes to hate consumerism, to denounce it maybe as Western decadence, that kind of thing. Destroy that ideology that was consuming everyone. God turned their hearts away so that they would be united and hand all their power to the single beast. This will happen until, it says, the words of God are fulfilled. That they cannot defeat. The beast grows in power. Now the woman had dominion, literally kingship over the kings, and they hated her for that. They had to bow, as it said about consumerism. Remember? Even governments bow to her, so they hate her for that, the kings. And so they gave up their kingship to the beast, and they consumed the prostitute. The question now is, who can destroy the beast? That question from chapter 13, verse 4 still echoes, now louder than before, that the beast has devoured the prostitute. Now the question is, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? Well, we know, don't we? The same one who we've already been told in that flash forward will defeat the multitude of kings. The Lamb. Well, for now, even in our time still, the prostitute may look alluring with a golden cup full of the intoxicants of money and luxuries, eroticism, success, everything you desire. And the beast may appear intimidating with all his power, but the Lamb is still King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's still the Lamb who shepherds his sheep, the one who promised that no one, not a beast or a king or a prostitute, can snatch one of his sheep from his hand. So, make sure that you're one of his sheep, that you're one of the lambs.